Welcome to the Nick Bryant podcast. Today, my guest is Laila Mickelwait. She wrote an amazing book, Takedown, Inside the Fight to Shut Down Pornhub for Child Abuse, Rape, and Sex Trafficking. How are you doing today, Laila?
I'm doing great. I'm so glad to be having this conversation with you. I'm just so grateful to have this opportunity. Thank you.
Laila was like a slingshot to the juggernaut. I mean, she really took on an unbelievable dark empire. And this is a quote from her book: just because something seems impossible doesn't mean you don't try. What made you, this was seemingly impossible. What made you try so hard?
I knew from the start when I uncovered, the deep complicity, and it took time, right, to get to all the details of the complicity of Pornhub and its ownership. But from early on, when I understood the way that they set up this site to enable abuse of countless victims around the world, and the way that the site was monetizing and immortalizing and globally distributing the trauma of so many victims, adults and children, the only response that felt appropriate was severe consequence. And it didn't matter if they were big or small. The right thing to do is the right thing to do. And justice is justice. And justice needed to be fully served to, not only bring healing and closure to the countless victims around the world, but to be a deterrent to future abusers who would see, this is a risk benefit calculation for them. And the only appropriate response that resonated now with millions of people is we have to shut down Pornhub and hold its executives accountable to the full extent of the law. And so that has been the call to action from the beginning. And regardless of whether it was possible from the start or not, that was what many people felt needed to happen, including survivors who were participating.
And you had gone up against the machine once before and not had a lot of luck. This is a quote from your book. I spent 13 years trying to make a difference with no real progress. I fought for 7 years to pass sex trafficking prevention bill in the US Congress that would have an impact on trafficking worldwide, but it faced endless roadblocks and ultimately failed.
It's
So you
true.
had tasted defeat in this area before, but yet
Yeah, I
you,
was very disillusioned and very discouraged with my work at that time. It'd been over a decade since I had engaged in the fight against sex trafficking. And, we had wins, now and then. And I won't say it was all failure, but when you're looking at it from a global perspective, when you're seeing that it's getting worse and your best efforts to try to stop it have really failed, I was at a point of being very discouraged with my work and even considered what would it be like to quit, but I couldn't ever bring myself to actually do it. But that was where I was at when this began 4 years ago. And today I feel very differently. I feel so much hope. I feel so encouraged to see the way that so many people came together to take on this giant of abuse called Pornhub and its parent company, MindGeek, and the way that survivors came forward and journalists and attorneys and 600 organizations joined the effort. And we all together really have brought a measure of accountability. And it's been so encouraging. So it's a transformation from where I was 4 years ago to today, that's for sure.
and it was quite an odyssey, which we will get into. At the beginning of your book, you give us some pretty raw data that's pretty ugly. At the end of 2019, Pornhub had 6.8 million videos uploaded annually. And that number has increased to 9.1 million videos. And then Pornhub had almost 11 million videos on the site when this all started. Today, it has almost 14 million videos. Pornhub sells 4.6 billion ad impressions every single day. 4.6 billion. That shows what a behemoth it is. And then it's been able to skirt around laws. You talk about US Code 2257, which mandates that producers of pornography age verify the people that are in that are in the pornography. And MindGeek skirted around it because it said that it wasn't producing pornography. And so MindGeek has been very, very slippery.
100%. I mean, they have, yes. And the stats are even bigger than what was described. We know now they had 42 million images on the site. They had almost 14 million videos on the site. So, this was 56 million pieces of content that they had at kind of the height of 2020 in the midst of the COVID pandemic, because they were taking advantage of that. They had distributed free Pornhub Premium globally. So they had more traffic, more uploads, more money than they ever had in 2020. But today they have been forced to take down 91% of the entire website. So they only have 5.2 million pieces of content on the site today. Much of that is still unverified content. So all of this began because one night, after thinking about some really horrific victim stories, 15-year-olds who's raped end up on the site, 14-year-olds, women, like a woman named Nicole Adamando, who, she was tortured. She was raped by her partner, and that abuse was filmed and uploaded to Pornhub, and she ended up killing her abuser, ended up getting sentenced to life in prison, separated from her 2 young children. Thankfully, that sentence was reduced to 7 years, and today she's finally free. But stories like that were in the headlines at the end of 2019, and it prompted a question in me. I was paying attention to what was happening, and I said, how in the world did this abuse end up on the world's most popular porn site? And it wasn't just the world's most popular porn site. It was actually the 10th most trafficked website in the world. Researchers had named Pornhub the 3rd most influential tech company on global society, just behind Facebook and Google. And they had more visits than Netflix, Amazon, Yahoo. And the question was, how in the world did this happen? And I tested the upload system, and I found out what millions of people already knew. And that was that they were not checking ID. They were not checking consent. There was no ID verification, no consent form. All you needed was an email address to upload anonymously to the site in minutes. And that's why the site actually became infested with videos of real sexual crime. And I felt like we have to sound the alarm on what's going on. And that's when the Trafficking Hub movement organically and unexpectedly started, was at the beginning of 2020. And, it's been a long journey, but thanks to the help of many people, pro-porn, anti-porn, right, left, atheists, Christians, all coming together, we've made a lot of progress, but there's still a lot of work to do.
In the book, you talk about how Pornhub came together, and you talk about Fabian Thielman, and he's in and out of the book throughout most of it. And he's essentially the Bill Gates of porn. He put together Pornhub, and you talk about he acquired a $162 million high interest loan from Callback Capital, and he had 125 secret investors, and they included Cornell University and JP Morgan.
Yes, it was actually a $362 million loan that he got from Colbeck Capital, and he rolled up the entire global porn industry pretty much. I mean, obtained a virtual monopoly by purchasing not only the world's most popular tube sites like Pornhub. This is the YouTube of porn. These are the porn tubes, free porn, but also the paid subscription sites, studios, brands. And, he had been named the Zuckerberg of porn for what he did in the way that he brought Pornhub particularly onto the global stage as the premier and most popular porn site in the world. And it was him that did that.
And you were up against CEO Ferris Antoon and COO David Cassillo, and the divas, the people that worked for them, the upper echelon. They called them the divas. And they acted like royalty because of their empire of illegalities and child rape. And there was a power behind the throne who was very anonymous, and his name was Bernd Bergmer. And he had been anonymous throughout most of the existence of Pornhub. So you outing him was a huge coup.
It was so important because these men were hiding in the shadows. You know, at one point I describe this idea that they were up there in their sixth floor aquamarine tower in Montreal, profiting from the exposure, and they were hiding themselves, right? Keeping themselves from the public, keeping their names, their identities from the public for so many years while they were exposing the bodies of unwilling victims for profit, and how just horrific that reality actually was. But they did need to be unmasked, and they were, thankfully, burned, like you described. You know, he was a hidden shareholder. He was a secret shareholder for so many years. And thanks to actually the former owner of Pornhub, Fabian, who we just described, who came forward to say he wanted to help. He had ulterior motives for that, but he actually revealed the name of the secret shareholder to me. And we were able to help, journalists dig deeper, expose him. And then he was finally located. He was between Hong Kong and London. And now today, victims are suing him personally, along with Faraz Antoon and David Tasillo, the executives and owners of Pornhub, for profiting intentionally from their abuse. And they're not only suing the owners and the executives and the company, they're suing the hedge funds. Colbeck Capital, who we just talked about with that $362 million loan that enabled Pornhub to exist, they're being sued by these courageous victims. Visa is being sued by these courageous victims as well. So it is, horrific what's happened, but it's so encouraging to see the way that these survivors are just bravely taking on these abusers and pursuing justice for themselves and for so many around the world. It's amazing.
And this is the kind of an individual CEO Faraz Antoon is. He makes millions and millions of dollars, but he has a nanny from the Philippines who has to work from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. instead of an 8-hour shift. And she's hired to take care of the children. He also demands that she cook, clean, and do laundry, all for $450 a week. And when he goes on extended vacations, he doesn't allow her any time off. Instead, he ships her to one of his relatives so she can work for them. So that is the kind of individuals that we're dealing with when we're dealing with the executives of MindGeek.
Yeah, we got to really discover and kind of go into their personal lives, into their business, other business ventures, and the way that they operated the company. Like you said, internally, they were called the Divas and the Bro Club, and the garage of the MindGeek offices was like a high-end car show, and they would just flaunt their wealth to each other. There was an amazing amount of arrogance in management and executive level C-suite, where they felt untouchable. And they ruled over MindGeek, really ruthlessly, and were the way that they operated, I guess, ethical would be the antithesis of what was going on at MindGeek. I mean, this was just unbelievable. But thanks to dozens of hours of insiders who came forward to talk and reveal all these details, we know the details about these owners that have never been revealed before, and I think they're important for the public to really understand.
The light is shown on cockroaches and they scurry. You really went deep into this and subjected yourself to horrific torture. And when I've investigated child trafficking, it's very difficult because you hear stories that are so anathema to what you believe or what you think society should be. And you were certainly deluged by them. And you talk about 3 victims, Serena, Rose, and Lily. Could you tell us a little bit about those 3 victims?